coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara. Look, there comes one of them now.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Movie Breakdown. We are so excited for you to be with us. And one of the reasons we're excited is we're kicking into the year-end shows now. We've got our 3-episode series of where we look back at the year, this year being 2021. And this week, it's our toddler series, because this is its only second year. It's walking now. It's our breakdown of the most underrated movies, where we're going to be looking at those pictures that either maybe the Rotten Tomato score is not so high and we think it's better than that. Maybe no one went to the theater to see it, or maybe no one's heard of it. This is our Hidden Gem episode. I'm Christopher Spicer.
And I'm Scott Martin. And just for myself personally, looking back on 2021, it hasn't been a year of necessarily of groundbreaking films that have slapped me upside the head and said, this is one of the best things you've ever seen. However, it's been a year of just, I've been finding surprisingly good mid-range films that really, are effective in what they're doing. Maybe they've got a goofy concept that they pull off. Maybe, it's a thriller that you had never even heard of that ends up, gripping you for the whole thing. At least, like I said, that's what I've found for 2021. And, lots of movies I feel that just didn't get seen by people, or that, the consensus was they weren't necessarily that good, but, they're still hanging in there as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's one of those years that I think because of COVID, and just because like half the year, at least in Ontario, the movie theaters weren't even open. And then for the second half, there's still people that are nervous of going, that I feel we're in this interesting kind of pocket where movies that maybe in other years would have done well, this year just completely were unseen and unknown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is because, people obviously aren't positive of what's going to happen when they schedule their film for release. And so this year has been much more of a year of me finding stuff that I've never heard of. I think because just releases have been so shaken up, and people maybe don't want to commit to a massive marketing campaign for a theater film that may not get the crowds.
Now, we don't normally do kind of news during our year-end shows, but I just want to quickly say one of the weird things is I do say that because of COVID, that I think it has affected a lot of movies, especially movies that would normally be aimed towards adults. I think, like you said, part of it's marketing, part of it's just people were scared to go out. But despite all that, Spider-Man Far From Home domestically made $250 million, which is a COVID record, a pandemic record. But not only that, but now it's the third grossing opening weekend ever. I'm looking at this and I'm like, most movies, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good for COVID. Would have Spider-Man done better without COVID, or is this just people were looking finally for an excuse to go out?
That's a really good question. There seemed to have been just an absolute large amount of hype behind this film, people talking about it, and yeah, I don't know if it's a case of just people being just looking and itching for a reason to get out of the house, and therefore, going to see Spider-Man. Looking at the numbers, worldwide, almost $600 million. I can't help but think that COVID has really played a role in that, whether it's springboarding people out to the theaters because there's finally something they want to see, or maybe, I don't know, but the numbers on this film are just absolutely insane, especially considering the landscape today.
Well, that's my point, is those are amazing COVID numbers, but let's say it's not COVID, those are amazing numbers.
Exactly. Those are insane numbers, yes.
It's got to be one of Sony's highest grossing movies of all time, even now, just opening wise. So good for them. Obviously, they made a smart deal joining up with Marvel and being part of the MCU, at least with those movies. And so good for them. Before we get right into this list, there's a few things I want to sort of say about. Well, before I say anything about the list, just in case you didn't see our midweek show, if you didn't watch our bonus episode, you may have noticed at the beginning of this episode there was some ads, and so this is just once again letting everyone know that we are now part of iHeartMedia. More specifically, their podcast brand, which is Spreaker Prime. And so we're really excited to be a part of them. We're really excited for this to be sort of the first kind of regular episode with this network. And so that's just a big thing. We're excited about that. This has been a crazy year. I could definitely tell you at the beginning of this year, I was not expecting that we'd be joining something like Spreaker Prime. And so I'm really excited to see what 2022 is going to be for the podcast and our potential to sort of expand and grow. Scott, next month we have a marketing meeting.
I feel like I have to go out and buy big boy pants. I do.
Well, luckily it's going to be online, so just have a big boy shirt.
Because I definitely feel like now I have to play the part of big boy with something like a marketing meeting, but it's very exciting. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, no, it really is. And so that is something that... I just wanted to remind people of, and we're excited about that, and we're really excited about what that means for our show. But again, as excited as the end of the year is, this has been a wacky year, and I feel like part of what happened with this year, one, just with it being COVID, I think it did a number on sort of my mental health. It definitely did a number on my career, and so there's a lot of things I had to focus on, and so I haven't necessarily... been able to focus on sort of movies as much as I normally did. I feel like I haven't seen as many movies, and one of the things is we shifted how our podcast worked. In June, we decided to sort of move away from the deep dive, or we move into the deep dive, do deep dive episodes rather than review several movies every single week. And so what that means is we saw a lot less 2021 movies, or at least a lot less Netflix movies. And so I think what happens is I'm going into this year seeing the least movies I ever have since we've started doing this podcast. And I think part of that is sort of due to sort of the format change. And so what happened was these last few weeks, I was scrambling to try to get into movies because like, wow, I'm not anywhere near my normal movie watching number for a year. And so I've been scrambling, but it's really weird because for me, it's easier to scramble for best of, because you look at what are on the best of list and you go see that stuff, and if it ends up not being your favorite movie, you at least feel like you didn't waste time. But for me, it's really hard to scramble for a worst of and an underrated, because a worst of, it's like you end up seeing a movie that's not very good, but it's not the worst, and so you feel like you totally wasted your time because it won't make your list. And then underrated, it's one of those things where how do you track down an underrated? To me, it feels like that's more just something you stumble upon during the year in your movie journey. And so this list is maybe not quite what I want it to be, because again, like I said, that's a hard thing to sort of track down and do. And in a normal year, I would have found several through our podcast and reviewing stuff. So this is the first year ever that I feel less of like an authority, like a movie critic, like someone who actually has all this knowledge, because he's seen so much stuff, and more rather just a movie fan that has a platform to say my opinion.
Well, good, because I'll tell you what, mister. Oh, yeah, last year. Sorry, I won't do that. I'm suffering a cold, and there's no way I can sustain that. See, there we go. Last year, I really found myself in your shoes, because you're right. The thing about underrated movies is you don't know they're underrated until after you've watched them.
Yes.
And then, therefore, at the end of the year show, I ended up having some movies on my underrated list that made my best of list, just because even though a lot of critics had seen them and liked them, I knew that a lot of mainstream audiences hadn't, and that I had to do that because you can't just set out to find an underrated film. It's impossible.
It's underrated for a reason.
You stumble across it. So I get your pain, but at the same time, welcome to my world of last year. Ha 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 ha.
Yet here we are this year. So Scott, kick us off. Or wait, or am I kicking us off?
No,
you're kicking us off.
I'm kicking us off. In no particular order, I will go. I will start off.
Okay, because last year you had an order, so that's good to know. Okay.
I did, and I'm going with no order whatsoever, and I'm going to mention a film that I had seen. Excuse me, before our mid-year episode that ended up getting talked about. And it's a film that I know that now, Chris, you have seen as well, and that is the Megan Fox starring Till Death. And this film is very interesting because as it starts off, something happens, and I kind of roll my eyes, and I tell myself, this is Gerald's Game. Someone saw Gerald's Game and is doing a slightly different take. However, as the film progresses, it just uses that concept as a launch point. It really goes in some very interesting directions. Megan Fox is really, really, really good in this. I think she gives an absolutely exceptional performance. The moments of tension are very tense. You know, I found myself feeling like I was gripping. I wasn't sitting in a chair, but I would have been gripping the side of the chair. This was really, literally one of those things where I pressed play on, not knowing what I was going to get, and ended up just getting absolutely blown away by this thriller that kind of blindsided me. And really made me wake up. Like I couldn't tell you the last time I'd seen Megan Fox in a film, but this movie definitely got me on alert and said, you know what, like she's still out there and she is really good at what she does.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you initially said, "Oh, you saw this." Like, "Oh, this is like Gerald's Game," because that's a helpful reminder that a movie can start off with a similar premise, but then become its very own thing and become interesting. Like you could look at something like Romancing the Stone, and they're in the jungle and they're trying to get this jewel, and you're like, "Oh, that's Indiana Jones," or there's certain things where you can see where it's like, "Oh, this is so." Not redundant, but contrived or derivative is the word I actually wanted. Derivative is the word I wanted. But once you see Till Death and you see the whole movie, you actually watch the movie, you realize that Gerald Game comparison's not really fair.
It absolutely isn't. And I mean, there's some really, really interesting moments that are set up, and I could easily see somebody sitting down and having this concept, thinking, okay, you know, I know about the kind of scenes I want to have, the places of peril we want Megan Fox's character, and then just force the script to get to those scenes, because this film really does seem like a movie that would have been written around a bunch of ideas that sounded really cool. However, Jason Carvey, who wrote it, does a wonderful job of weaving it all together so it never feels like it's just you're being mashed from one sequence to another for no reason other than they thought it was going to look cool.
Yeah, for sure. And this movie taught me sort of two lessons that maybe I would have liked have known earlier. One is to not discount Megan Fox. I really only knew her through sort of the Transformers movies, and I knew she was a beautiful woman, but I never thought much of her as an actress. So I saw a Megan Fox starring movie. I'm like, well, that's obviously going to be horrible. And she's really good in here. She's good at what she's expected to do. Is she going to win Oscars? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what the rest of her career is, but I've learned, okay, she's actually really talented, and she's got a command of the screen, and she actually brought nuance to this character. This was a kind of actually deceptively complicated character as things go on. I mean, she is having an affair, and there's certain things where about this character, right, like the decisions she kind of made to put her in this situation, but she's still sympathetic, and she brings off sort of this tough girl demeanor. Like maybe she's not Ripley level, maybe she's not sort of at the level of sort of what Sarah Connor would be, but I feel like she could be in the